Our freedom of conscience and religion is being challenged by laws and regulations imposed by secular society. It's time to hear from the top Christian litigators in the nation who have come forward to tell us the truth and help us defend our faith.
Hear ye, hear ye. All rise. Faith on Trial with Defender of the Faith, Deacon Mike Mano, is in session.
Welcome again to Faith on Trial. We examine the influence of law in society and people of faith. And a special welcome to those of you who are just joining us for the first time. I'm Deacon Mike Mano, your host. I'm here with Gina No, our co-host. Gina, how are you this morning?
I'm doing well, Deacon Mike.
Very
glad
good
to be here.
Well, we're glad you're here too.
Yes.
The weather has been nice but hot lately.
Yeah, there's some crazy weather going on. We're here in the Midwest. We've been kind of blessed with decent summer.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it wasn't yesterday, I think, the first day of summer, Thursday?
Something like
Wednesday
that.
Wednesday this week, yeah.
You can't tell by the clock. You can tell by the sun usually when summer starts. And it seems like it started already. But one of the things that happens when it starts and it gets hot out there, especially in July and August, is this, at least in my yard, the grass stops growing. Because it's so dry.
Yeah. Then you get a break from
which means I don't have to go mow. Yeah, which
good.
Is so one thing. But I do have the sprinkler out, and I'm trying to develop a better yard in the front. So we'll see how that goes.
Keep it green for longer.
Keep it green. No.
Something else that comes at this time of the year, Deacon Mike, in a flurry, we'll start getting the remaining Supreme Court justices' opinions.
Right, and this morning, I should say this is Thursday morning because we tape on Thursdays, this program. There was an announcement that there's going to be no major cases announced today. So I don't know if they're coming tomorrow.
Does that mean tomorrow? They have till what? Next week?
They have to whenever they want to release it. I mean, they're the Supreme Court, you know.
So they could go into July rules. With their opinions?
Yeah, they could. Yeah, they could.
Wouldn't that cut into their vacation time?
That's why they won't.
Oh, I see.
That's why they won't. A lot of them have vacations coming up, and they've got other gigs to do. You know, their speaking events, seminars that they speak at, things like that. Yeah. So
I noticed the attacks against our justices have been coming in a little bit stronger as we get closer to these final days of
They have been, especially now against Alito, and of course this is what's going to continue on. And I mentioned in one of my columns in The Wanderer a couple of weeks ago that what they're flaying Alito right now and Thomas earlier was for not reporting trips that they took, hospitality trips, they called them, because the person who was providing the trip provided the hospitality. So a lot of times they were staying in a person's house and flying on his plane or whatever to get to wherever the house is. And at the time all this happened, there was no requirement to report any of those. They were considered personal hospitality by friends. And
so the rules changed in the meantime?
The rules changed because the Democrats got on these guys and kept saying, well, this shows corruption on the court. Well, they weren't corrupt. But it's going to come back to bite them because Justice Sotomayor has some travel problems of her own now, if you want to go looking into that. But, of course, they won't look into that.
I was going to say, you say it's going to come back to bite them. It just never seems like that
Never
happens.
Seems to happen, yeah.
Yes.
It doesn't go back. But anyway.
So we have a couple of cases today that aren't at the Supreme Court,
right,
but
they're not
definitely
at the Supreme
important
Court.
to us.
Mariah Gondeiro, who is a vice president and counsel with the Advocates for Faith and Freedom, is going to be here. She's been here a number of times before, so we're happy to have her back. But this is a case that she's working on now where there is a church that cannot rent space from a school for Sunday services. And, you know, all around the country this happens. Small congregations rent places
right here in
churches.
Des Moines. I remember having to clear out a gymnastics tournament from a gymnasium in a school because that next morning there was going to be a church service there.
That's right. And I had a friend who was a Baptist minister one time, and he used to tell me all the time, I'm going to have a Catholic service for you. Catholic, come on over. And I'd go over there, and they always had breakfast and everything that they'd make. That's pretty good.
So they used the kitchen and the gymnasium.
So my friend and I would go over there, and we'd sit in the back row and rattle our rosary beads for them. So let them know we were here. Yeah. But anyway, you can guess why they're not renting the church the space. It's their traditional Christian beliefs. So we're going to talk to Mariah about that. Okay, and then we're going to talk with Kayla Toney, who is with First Liberty. And this is a case of a college professor who was terminated over his teaching or his belief. It's a little unclear right now what it is, so we'll find out, over biology.
Interesting. Was he a biology teacher, or was he a theology teacher?
No, I think he was a science teacher of some sort.
Okay.
And so we'll find out more from her when we get her on here. So that's what we have up for today.
Oh, well, I'm looking forward to
They're going to be
finding out how
cases.
these come out.
Yeah, and a lot of these cases, they don't seem like a whole lot, but they really mean a lot.
Well, I'm just shocked that, they seem like small cases, very local, most likely be settled right there in the jurisdiction where they began. And pretty soon you and I are talking about them at the Supreme Court. So what we would call settled law is probably not settled.
It's not settled unless you agree with it. That's how it's settled. But no, what happens is they tie these people up in knots and they pay a lot of money for well, of course, in these cases, these are both pro bono law groups that are representing these. This is why I always say at the end, if you've got a chance to send some extra change to these people, these are the ones that are out there in the front lines that are defending.
That's right. But it's often taxpayers that are funding the other side of the cases.
And it's
so
unlimited.
Those are unlimited.
It's unlimited,
in most cases, yes.
All right, well, we'll get to them in just a couple of minutes. Do you have a prayer to open us up with?
I do. I have a prayer for peace today. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. God of peace, bring your peace to our violent world. Peace in the hearts of all men and women, and peace among the nations of this earth. Turn your way of love to those whose hearts and minds are consumed with hatred, and strengthen us all in hope. Give us the wisdom and courage to work tirelessly for a world where true peace and love reign among the nations and in the hearts of all. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Gina. And we're going to take a break right now. When we come back, we're going to have Mariah Gondeiro, who is a vice president of the Advocates for Faith and Freedom. You're listening to Faith on Trial on Iowa Catholic Radio. And we're back. You're listening to Faith on Trial on Iowa Catholic Radio. And with us right now is Mariah Gondeiro, who is the vice president and counsel with the Advocates for Faith and Freedom, one of our go-to organizations that we talk to all the time. Mariah, how are you this morning?
I'm doing so good. Thank you for having me on.
Certainly. I was talking with your staff the other day when we were setting up the interview, and I was mentioning that we've had you on so many times. We may be required by law to offer you a position here. Something like that.
Well, I'll take it.
Okay, well, the position we have for you is unpaid intern. How's that?
Okay, perfect.
Okay. All right. We have this case of a church that cannot rent space in a school. You want to give us your version of that, how that is happening and what is going. This is obviously not a situation that is unprecedented. This happens all over the country. No,
it happens more and more in the day we're living in. But yeah, so we're representing a church in Maine, the Pines Church. They're a small church that outgrew their area that they were renting in a theater, and they wanted to rent out space at the school district, the Hermon School District. They would be able to accommodate all the people that were coming to their church, and he thought it would be a walk in the park. He would just have to do a formal or an interview that was just kind of routine, talk with the board just like everyone else does it, and it would be easy. You'd be able to get in. He even offered to rent the space at a higher price, way above what they were asking for, to show the district that he was very interested in investing in the area. And the district came back and asked him all these questions about what is the stance on homosexuality, abortion, LGBTQ issues, conversion therapy, and then they made him go through this presentation in front of the board where they kind of just grilled him on his beliefs. And some of the board members, even during the meeting, mentioned or suggested that it wouldn't be a good idea to rent to him because it would create a negative public perception. And so they denied him the lease that he was asking for. And then we filed a lawsuit because to me, it was pretty blatant what they did.
Yeah. Now, a couple of things. First of all, have they rented that property to anybody else yet?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Okay.
That's why, to me, it was a pretty straightforward case.
Okay. All right. And then the other question I have is, you're in California and this is in Maine. You get a lot of frequent flyer mileage when you handle these cases?
I do have a United card.
Yeah.
I do have quite the flyer miles built up on that. But with federal court, oftentimes you don't have to be there in person nowadays. That you can just file a complaint, and a lot of the hearings are remote unless it's like a trial.
Mm-hmm.
But
I'm familiar with it. Yeah, we've had electronic filing here for a while. It was always so very easy to just put something on an email or whatever it is, how you sign up for it, and get it filed, and you get a response back from the clerk saying they received it, and you're done.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So what is going on now? You filed the complaint. Besides asking for damages, or what is it that you're asking for?
Well, damages, and that they, in an injunction as well, that the judge tells them you have to, rent out this space to the church, because there's not a lot of places to rent for the church. That's why they asked the school district to rent the space, and they have this space open during the weekends that they're not using. And so we're also asking for damages because they weren't able to rent out this space. They've lost money. And so, but the pastor, he's not after money. The reason why he wanted to file the lawsuit, the number one reason is, I need to set a precedent, because I don't want this to happen anymore. I don't want this to happen to anyone else. That's what this case is about for him.
Mm-hmm. Now, of course, churches renting out school buildings on Sunday is kind of a familiar pattern. We have that here a lot. I was telling Gina before we got you on the air that I had a friend who was a Baptist pastor who had a church rented out, or a school rented out like that, and he used to invite my friend and I over there all the time because he was going to give a special sermon for Catholics. So we would sit in the back row with our rosary beads out, trying to harass them a little bit, but they did feed us, and it was a nice Sunday morning. Gina, do you have anything?
Oh yeah, it's so good to have you, Mariah. I'm curious in reading this case more about this particular church. Are they meeting somewhere right now? Is this a delay in getting the lease enacted, causing them problems as an institution?
Yes, they're meeting back at the theater they were in, but that place doesn't really accommodate everyone that's coming to the church now. And their church has been growing a lot in the past 2 years, and so that's why they wanted to find another space. And so it has been very hard to accommodate everyone. They haven't been able to accommodate everyone because it's just not possible. So they are meeting, and as you know, people might make the argument, well, they can just stream it online, but a lot of churches don't have streaming. And also, as we know, during COVID-19, people want to be in person. Yes. They want to gather in person. It's not the same.
Right. It's a type of community that's very rewarding and heart-fulfilling for people of faith. So I agree with that in-person meeting for certain. It looks like that there was one particular board member, like they had everything from what I've read of the history, they had everything lined up with the school, and then one particular board member wanted to know where they stood on diversity, inclusion, and equity, made some inquiry to the superintendent, and that's what put this particular lease arrangement into this ugly space.
Yes, it was one particular board member that was asking these types of questions. And then during the board meeting that they have, I think my impression was that other board members kind of felt pressured as well when he was talking about these issues. And then the superintendent and principal, they felt like renting to this church would create a negative public perception, which to me just shows religious animus, that they would even say that publicly. They wouldn't say that about the Boys and Girls Club, AAU, all the other organizations that they're renting to. and they don't ask them these types of questions. They don't require them to answer questions on what is your stance on abortion. I mean, that has nothing to do with whether you're fit to lease out space.
All right. So I imagine the school board has an attorney that's defending its school board in this decision. What's the process now? Is it are you in negotiations with them as attorneys, or has it actually filed a case?
Well, right now, we filed the lawsuit, and then, the other side usually gets a couple months, and then they respond with an answer or a motion to dismiss. And so right now we haven't been in communication with them. It's just been kind of quiet, which happens right after you file a lawsuit. Sometimes attorneys will reach out right away because they want to get a case settled before they have to answer the complaint, but we haven't heard from them at this point.
Very, very difficult to see a community be put in that kind of situation based on one person's ability to navigate the discussion around, these issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Well, that's what we're seeing now, even today, is really a small minority of people who are very radical in their beliefs, controlling the narrative and controlling people's decisions because others are just afraid. They're afraid to do what's right because they don't want to be ostracized and they don't want to, cause any problems. That's what we see in, the employment context, so many different contexts. These issues, the school context, we see it in the school context so much. That's why we have to file lawsuits, because these districts, these individuals, they need to know that there will be consequences for their decisions.
Yeah, we've seen over and over again, as you alluded to, that a small group can control a much larger group just by hanging together and making their points forcefully. They can intimidate a lot of other people into silence.
Exactly. We saw that during COVID-19.
Sure.
Well, I would point out also there's probably quite a bit of precedence for you to rely on in this particular case. I can't imagine that it could go very far. But I would point out that we talked about this when gay marriage became legalized in the state of Iowa. Catholic churches had to be careful about how they rented their space, because if a gay marriage, if the church was renting their community hall just to anyone under any circumstances, then there could be possibilities with gay marriages or gay marriage receptions could be celebrated against the beliefs of the church in their hall.
Especially around that time, I was director of deacons, and I remember notifying some of my other deacons that be careful when people come up to be married in your church. You have to have some guidelines, because what will happen is they will trick you into a contract violation and sue you that way. So we were on guard out here a little bit, but you bring up a good point, Gina, that this happens all over and in every aspect of what we do. And I've got to ask you, Mariah, if this is the attitude of the school board, does this maybe answer the question why Johnny can't read?
Why Johnny can't read?
Yeah. I mean, you look at test scores around the country, and they're all down.
We're focused on the wrong thing in the school.
Yeah.
I think, you're very inquisitive. I've thought about that too, because we deal with so many school districts now. Because obviously we're dealing with this issue with the church in Maine, but we're dealing with other issues with teachers who are just, in my opinion, they're just weirdos. They're absolute weirdos. And I was thinking the other day, why are these school districts, so obsessed with this agenda and making sure everyone agrees with this agenda when we're falling behind on test scores with so many other countries? I mean, our education system is so bad in America, but yet we want to make sure that children can learn that they can be a boy or a girl by the time they get into kindergarten. I mean, that's way more important than making sure that our curriculums are outpacing other countries. You're right. I mean, it does demonstrate just the districts that are not focusing on what's actually important and why they're there. They're not there to convert your child. They're not there to teach your child that he can be, he can change his identity. That's not their job. Their job is to educate them.
Right, and they're ruining the things that they are in charge of. I'm thinking about the hearings the other day in Congress over allowing men, trans women, I guess they call them, to participate in women's sports. They're actually killing off women's athletics.
And that's another example of, again, just like a small minority of radical people controlling everyone's decisions. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, I always ask, where are the feminists? Because if this continues to gain ground, we're not going to have women's sports. So to me, it's not even logical. It is like people are just brainwashed and going along with this because it makes them feel good, makes them look good. That's what this is about, in my opinion, from just looking at it, trying to look at it from the top level.
Yeah, they claim they claim to have compassion for all of these people, but actually it's a false compassion, because if you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, if you're not educating the kids, if you're not allowing women's athletics to flourish, you're not doing what your job is.
Absolutely. It's a counterfeit. And I think right now, like, the enemy is just, he's so after identity, and you've seen this so much over the last 10 years, blurring the lines with gender and just wanting to destroy identity. I think there's a real identity crisis in this country, and I think a lot of it is spiritual.
Yeah, it is, and it's we're fighting against demonic activity, really, because that's where this is coming from. It can't be coming from just regular people. It has to be instigated someplace. But one of the things I've noticed, Mariah, and not to change the subject, but I guess you'd call us more conservative or traditional people, are the only ones that seem to smile and be happy. If you look at this group of people that are trying to block, like this church and other cases that we've talked about, they don't. If you look at them, they don't seem to be happy people.
Oh, absolutely. It's a counterfeit joy. It's a counterfeit happiness, because as you guys know, the only place you can find true joy and happiness is through Jesus Christ.
Right.
And when you're trying to find it through all these things, it's empty, and you might have temporary happiness. You see a lot of people having temporary happiness, but it doesn't last very long. They're typically very messed up people, and that's why it's sad that people are encouraging this, because at the end of the day, it's not helping them. It's not going to bring them true peace. So
yeah, that's true. And you're seeing more and more of this stuff. Mariah, how can any of our listeners get a hold of you or find out what's going on in Advocates for Faith and Freedom?
Yes, they can go to our website, and you'll be able to find our email there. It's faith-freedom.com. You can contact us through the website. You can follow along with us, join our newsletter. We're always looking for more supporters. We take on every case pro bono.
Right.
So
that's why we also
survive.
Yeah, and that's why we also recommend that if people have some spare change that they can send along, that's a good place to send their funds, because you're going to use it wisely and you're going to use it protecting traditional Christian values.
Yes.
Well, I want to thank you for joining us again today. We'll have that free internship open for you anytime you want to stop by for it. We'll get you on the non-payroll, I guess.
Okay, I'll let my boss know that I have another job opening.
All right, we'll talk to you later. Thank you very much, Mariah Gondeiro, Vice President and Counsel with the Advocates for Faith and Freedom. We're going to take a short break right now. We will be back This is Faith on Trial on Iowa Catholic Radio. And we are back. You're listening to Faith on Trial on Iowa Catholic Radio, and we are here now with Kayla Toney from First Liberty Institute, who's got an interesting case about a professor that was, I guess, unprofessored, sent away, fired. You want to explain, Kayla, what is going on in this case?
Yes, and thank you so much for having me.
Oh, certainly. Thank you for coming.
Of course, I'm happy to. Dr. Johnson Varkey is a biology professor in San Antonio, Texas. He has taught at St. Philip's College, which is a local public community college, for the past 20 years. He's always taught human anatomy and biology with a great record, exemplary performance reviews. And everything changed last fall when a handful of students walked out of his class because he taught the unremarkable concept that sex is defined by chromosomes X and Y. And just about a month later, he received a notice that he was being investigated for an ethics violation. And then he was fired without any opportunity to talk with the students or to demonstrate that he was teaching basic biology.
Wow. So biology teacher is being fired, I guess, for not teaching politically correct biology.
Yes, I guess so. And the college really didn't give him an opportunity to see the complaints or to meet with the students. He would have been happy to do that. But the only concept he can think of that could possibly have offended them would be, that concept that sex is defined by chromosome X and Y. And then when he was teaching human development, he would teach that life begins at conception when a zygote is created, not later on at birth, for example. And that, again, is a standard biological concept. He didn't teach it as a
verboten to teach it.
But that's right.
Yeah. All right, the first question I have, and this goes to due process. If he was not given an opportunity to confront or respond, does that violate the due process rights that he has? Or maybe more importantly, what rights did he have in his college contract?
That's a great question. The college has a policy for handling non-academic grievances from students, and they did not follow that policy at all. So that policy requires an in-person meeting with the professor before the students would even file any sort of complaint. That didn't happen. It requires a meeting with the professor and administrators to discuss the issue. That didn't happen. And then there's also an appeal process, and Dr. Varkey didn't have any of that. He was just fired without any opportunity for discussion.
Okay. So it's like almost like Nazi Germany, right? You just don't like somebody and you cut them loose.
It's an example of cancel culture, certainly, that we're seeing across the nation.
You've not filed a lawsuit, as I understand it, yet.
That's right. We sent a warning letter to the school requesting that they reinstate Dr. Varkey immediately and that they acknowledge that his termination was wrongful. And we've given them 2 weeks to respond, which is plenty of time. And so if we don't get a response from them, then we are planning to pursue legal remedies as Dr. Varkey directs.
Right. And this would be, I take it, in a federal court?
Yes, the process is first to file a complaint at the EEOC, the Equal Opportunity Employment Commission. And then if the EEOC decides not to investigate, but decides that, he can go ahead and sue, which is typically how our clients' cases are handled, then we can go ahead and file a federal lawsuit against the college.
Now, I think EEOC, what do they have, 180 days or something like that to respond? Or am I out of date on that? Yeah.
Yes, I think we have 180 days from the time of firing to file that. So if we do file, it will be at the end of July.
Okay.
And then after they respond, we would have 90 days to file the lawsuit.
Okay. All right. And so they either give you the go-ahead with a right to sue letter or investigate it themselves. Yes,
exactly.
Okay. So what will you be asking for in a lawsuit that you may be filing? I'm sure that as far as your client is concerned, if you can get this matter settled as quickly as possible, the better for him, especially financially, because he'll be back working again. But
yes,
assuming the worst here, what are you going to be asking for from the federal district court?
It's hard to say at this point. As you mentioned, Dr. Varkey's goal is just to be reinstated so that he can continue teaching and to have his record cleared so that, he's able to teach elsewhere in the future, perhaps. So that's really our goal, and we're hopeful that this letter will have that effect. But if not, a lawsuit would allow us to seek a whole range of remedies. We're not sure at this early stage what those would be, but they could include reinstatement, back pay for the time that he was unemployed, damages, interest, lost benefit,
right?
Those sorts of things.
And you also have
really a range of remedies, but the first one would be reinstatement.
And you also have the advantage of discovery, where you can find out a little bit more about this case and who these people are that have filed the complaint. Do you know anything about them?
We do not.
Mm-hmm.
No. He said, in all his years of teaching, he had taught probably 1,500 students, and none of them had ever complained. He had always had really great interactions with them. And so it was just this handful of students that, took offense when he said that sex was determined by chromosomes X and Y. And
then who was it in the school that made the decision to just bypass all of the due process rights that this guy would have and terminate him?
It was the vice president for academic success.
Okay.
So he's the one who signed the letter saying that there was this ethics investigation and then saying that Dr. Varkey was terminated. So he seems to handle personnel matters for the college.
So they're calling it an ethics investigation.
That's right, which is very strange because the ethics code that they cited actually guarantees academic freedom. And it says that the professors shall encourage and defend the unfettered pursuit of truth by both colleagues and students, supporting the free exchange of ideas, observing the highest standards of academic honesty and integrity, and seeking always an attitude of scholarly objectivity and tolerance of other viewpoints. And Dr. Varkey exemplified that in his great teaching record. I mean, he was always tolerant of other viewpoints. He wanted to teach the truth. He wanted to teach the free exchange of ideas, and it's really the college that violated its own code when it
that's the first thing that popped out at me.
Freedom.
Mm-hmm. I don't know what kind of academic freedom that you need to have to teach basic biology, X's and Y's and chromosomes, but I can't imagine an ethics complaint over that. Gina, did you have a question?
Oh, I find this story ironic that they're basing this dismissal on religious beliefs is one of the complaints, and that the public community college is named after one of our great saints,
mm-hmm.
St. Peter. I'm sorry, St. Philip.
St.
Philip,
mm-hmm.
right.
So that I want to point out that irony that's just flashing at me in this particular story.
Now, when I saw that, I had to look up the community college because the name is St. Philip's. I thought it might have been a Christian or Catholic school. Yeah.
Right, which would make it. The other thing that's disturbing to me is that we give our students so much power to cancel, quote unquote, cancel, without any ability to discuss the matter and maybe address the misunderstanding or the offense of some sort. Do we know that students are behind this particular movement? Because from everything I've read, Dr. Varkey has received nothing but exemplary performance reviews up to this point.
That's right. Yeah, we do believe that the complaints were from students, but, as I said, we haven't seen them. He never had the opportunity to sit down and talk with those students, which he would have been really happy to do. So, yes, we do think that's the source, But yeah, I do think it goes to the larger issue that students should be able to encounter ideas that are different from their own. That's the whole purpose of education, right? Is to expand your horizons and to have to grapple with
used to be anyway
a variety of viewpoints.
Wow.
That's right, and especially at the college level, students can handle hearing ideas that they might disagree with. And the other irony, going along with what you had pointed out, is that all of his textbooks and curriculum was approved by the college. And so, he showed us the slides from his textbook that he used to teach basic principles of human reproduction and embryonic development. And those textbooks were approved by the college. So he was essentially fired for teaching what they told him to teach.
Well, and we know that professors, many of them express their ideology in the classroom and is offensive to students across this country. And they work through it, right? It helps the students develop thoughts and ideas and philosophies about the world around them. So it seems strange that a professor at that level would ever be attacked by the administration for these kinds of teachings. The other thing that comes to mind is that we've had a program dedicated to the attacks on professors at college campuses from their colleagues that don't follow the new ideology of liberal thought, and that they're iced out and they're attacked and they're kind of boxed out and ostracized. So is there a possibility that something like that might be going on in this particular college campus also?
I think that's definitely a possibility. It's, unfortunately a trend that we've seen as well. Cancel culture has become very, very dominant on college campuses. And we can't help but wonder the impact of Dr. Varkey's religion on all of this. And that is, another thing that's interesting about this case is that the college is the one that made this into a religious issue by claiming that he was doing religious preaching in class. Now, the reality is Dr. Varkey is an associate pastor as a volunteer position. He teaches at International Bible Church, which is a large, diverse congregation in San Antonio. But that did not mean that he was preaching in class. He never was sharing his faith or proselytizing or anything like that. He would just mention in his first class of the semester that he was a pastor, and that was something that he did, in addition to his role as a biology professor. And so I wonder if the students would have come after him if he were not a pastor on the side, or if he were not religious.
Right.
It seems like that's really some targeting that he's experienced because of his faith.
It may even be his colleagues under those conditions. True.
Yeah. It's very interesting that he is a pastor at this congregation. That almost answers many of our questions here, because we see this happening all over, and I'm sure that you do too, Kayla. You see these cases from all over the country, not always the ones that you are involved in, but ones that you have to examine at least to make an argument, for precedent in a case that you may be dealing with.
That's right. Yeah, we have a lot of cases in the workplace right now.
Yeah. So where, I don't want to ask you a stupid question, but I guess it is kind of, so where are these coming from? What's happening in our culture out there today that we have this cancel culture, that we are teaching college students that if they get a couple of people together and want to complain about a teacher, you can get them fired, or in one case, you don't like the amount of homework he's giving you or term papers he assigns, you go to the administration and they can the guy.
Yeah, it's hard to say where exactly it's coming from. I think a lot of it is just kind of a general shift toward, this idea of tolerance that's very intolerant and inclusivity that's very exclusive of religious people. I think that's something we've seen in the workplace, and college administrations probably have a lot to do with it because, they're the ones who can choose to investigate professors who might have a religious bent. They're the ones who, ultimately make the decisions based on how to handle students or any sort of student complaints. So I do think it's important for Christians to stay in academia because the more that they leave, the more it allows these woke administrations to make these types of decisions. And really what it comes down to is how broad is their commitment to diversity? Diversity is great, but is it only diversity of appearance, or is it diversity of thought, diversity of ideas, diversity of religious beliefs? Because that's, an important element of diversity as well. And that's something that Dr. Varkey brings. He's got an Indian American cultural heritage, and he has studied biology his whole career. He's really got a lot of unique insights that he can bring to the table. And I think it's a loss for students when professors like him are silenced. And really, it's a loss for academia as a whole when there's not that diversity of thought that religious people can bring to the table.
Yeah, diversity seems to be looked at differently than we would look at it. You look at people's color, look at people's, immutable traits, and that counts as diversity, but thought doesn't. And it seems to me that especially on a college campus, you want that diversity of thought.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that is something else interesting that we're seeing that is also very prevalent in the healthcare sector. One of my other clients, Valerie Klosterman, was fired from the University of Michigan health system because of her religious beliefs. And ironically, she was fired by the director of diversity, equity, and inclusion, but there was no inclusion of her Christian faith in the workplace.
Yeah, it seems to me that wherever these DEI people pop up, more problems follow than are solved.
Yes, so true.
Let me ask you this. First of all, before I lose my train of thought, how is your other client doing on that case in Michigan?
She's doing well. Yeah, really during the whole case, her focus has been that God would be glorified, and it's been really beautiful to see her and her family as witness. Right now, we are kind of in a holding pattern. We're waiting for the court to rule on, which claims of hers will continue to go forward. We've brought claims on her behalf under the First Amendment, the Free Exercise Clause, the Free Speech Clause, as well as Title VII, which is the federal law that protects employees of all kinds from discrimination. And one of those protected classes is religion. So that's a law that protects Valerie Klosterman. It protects Dr. Varkey. It protects any person of faith in the workplace, whether it's in a university setting or not, from discrimination because of their religious belief.
Now, as I scroll through your website, I see a lot of cases involving that, discrimination on the basis of religion. So as long as we've mentioned your website, why don't we tell people how they can find it and follow what is going on with you?
Yes, absolutely. Please check out our website at firstliberty.org. We have there's a button on there that says Get Legal Help, and if you click on that, there's a form where you can fill out if you've had any sort of religious liberty issue or you just want some advice about something. This is not guaranteeing that you're going to have to go through a lawsuit. A lot of times we are able to just quietly help people behind the scenes and help them avoid litigation. But yes, there's our Request Legal Help form, which is a great way to get in touch with us. We keep all of that information confidential, and we try to get back to you quickly. And then, on our website, firstliberty.org, you can see all of our pending cases. You can see some great wins that we've had. One exciting thing to watch out for is the case on behalf of Gerald Groff. This case is at the Supreme Court right now, and they are due to decide it any time, probably next week, by the end of June.
Is this case the postman?
Yes, Yes, exactly. He is a postal worker from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. He's very committed to keeping the Christian Sabbath, in accordance with the Fourth Commandment. And this was never a problem until Amazon wanted him to start doing Sunday deliveries. And it was basically quit or be fired when he wanted to have his Sabbath accommodation. So this case has the potential to impact every religious American in the workplace, because what we've asked the court to do is to return to the original meaning of Title VII, which is that employers are required to provide religious accommodations in the workplace unless that poses an undue hardship. And unfortunately, there was a bad case called TWA versus Hardison, which said that undue hardship is really just any burden at all.
Any inconvenience,
That's right. So all the employer has to show is that one coworker complained about a schedule swap, or it would cost $10 extra to pay someone overtime. Mm-hmm. And that's just not faithful to the text of Title VII or the intent of the legislature when they passed it, or ultimately the Constitution, which treats religion as a very special element of human life that needs to be respected. So we are asking the court to return to that understanding of undue hardship as, an actual burden that the employer would have to show. And in most cases, religion can be accommodated very easily. It's as simple as an exemption, or allowing someone to wear a headscarf, or allowing someone to, rest on Sunday, worship God, and then work on Saturday instead. So these are simple things. They really don't need to be a political or a divisive issue, but we're very hopeful that the Supreme Court will get this right in the Groff case. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah, I think the case that you're referring to must be, when you consider precedent, must be kind of an outlier, that there be a lot of other precedent for that. Yeah.
That's right. It's an outlier that's unfortunately done a lot of damage.
Yeah, I can understand.
One of the things that we made sure to do in bringing the case to the Supreme Court was to get a lot of amicus briefs in support. I believe we had 14 just in support of granting the petition, which is, an unusually large number for that early stage.
I've read through those things before, and there's more amicus briefs than there is sometimes in the meat of the argument that's being made. But anyway,
That's right.
What First Liberty does is all pro bono, correct?
Yes, absolutely. We serve all our clients free of charge.
And so when you go to that website, there's probably a place on there, if you have some spare change, you might want to send their way if you can, because what they're doing is they're out on the front lines protecting us.
Exactly.
Thank you. Yes, it's a pleasure to do this work, and it's really a blessing. I have prospective clients ask me all the time, how much am I going to be set back? How much am I going to owe you? And it's such a joy to be able to say, we are donor funded and we can represent you for free all the way to the Supreme Court and back if it's necessary. It really gives us the freedom to fight for people of faith. Very
good. Well, I want to thank you. You are doing God's work, and we certainly appreciate what you do. I want to thank you for joining us today. Kayla Toney from First Liberty Institute. Thank you for joining us. And Gina and I will be right back after these messages. You're listening to Faith on Trial on Iowa Catholic Radio. And we're back. You're listening to Faith on Trial on Iowa Catholic Radio. Gina, a couple of interesting cases today. They don't seem to be like the earth-shaking cases that we've had in some instances, but these are extremely important cases, these cases involving these local issues, because we're seeing these sprout up all over the country.
Exactly. The case out of Maine with the church not being able to celebrate their services in the public facility that rents to just about anyone. Reminds me of that California case with the strip mall. Do you remember that? And they ended up winning, millions of dollars in the end. It took them years. First they were told they couldn't no longer use the facility. And then when they lost that case, they said they could no longer use the parking lot. I mean, they just came at them from every direction. And it seems that these cases continue to, the animus against people of faith is just very prevalent in these cases.
And you can see it very easily in the case of the professor that was terminated.
Right.
He's teaching biology. He's teaching it out of the textbooks that the school has adopted, and yet he's terminated. And what bothers me in this whole thing is he's given no notice, no opportunity to confront. Okay, this is a hallmark of due process, is you have the right to confront, you have the right to respond, and you have a right to process.
Right. There's laws, and I would say promoted and enacted by a lot of our liberal legislators in labor laws to try to protect the employee, and yet those are the same values that now are working against this professor. It was a hard case to discuss, and I know I was kind of quiet because so much of the case is just conjecture. The poor professor hasn't been given any information about why one day he is like on a pedestal, one of the best professors at the school, and the next day he's asked to leave within 12 days of a letter being sent to him that he's under review for violations.
The advantage of litigation here for him is he has discovery open to him. So in other words, he can request the names and what was said about him. He can request all of that, and the school has to provide it. And then he can depose those people.
Right.
So there'll be a confrontation here at some point. Either that or the school is going to read the handwriting on the wall and fall over on this thing.
It'll be really interesting to find out where the complaint originated. One of my thoughts after our discussion with Kayla was, we're looking at universities. So part of what I do is I join the parents' pages for the different colleges, kind of to see what the parents are saying and where their questions are and how they're interacting with other parents. It makes me wonder if maybe even one of the students said something to their parent, and the parent, may have filed some kind of a complaint. Or is there some kind of a donor that supports the college or university, and this is an issue of money that they don't want to lose a funding source? So we'll follow the case and find out exactly where this bubbled up and how it was instigated so quickly, rapidly, and decisively.
Right. And, of course, that's the problem with the due process here, that he doesn't know those things. He wasn't given that information. Normally, especially if these people had some type of policy manual.
Right, they didn't follow.
That they didn't follow, because those policy manuals can be considered a contract. All right, there was a squib case I sent out to you, and I thought this was kind of interesting. This is in California, where a California restaurant has been ordered to pay $140,000 in back wages and damages to employees. And what had happened was apparently the owner of this restaurant hired a fake priest to come into his store and to counsel his employees and to hear their confessions.
Right. It sounds like the employees are perhaps immigrants, quite a few of them. And in fact, there's some immigration issues here with their immigration status or their ability to be in the States, that actually the restaurant owner had violated their rights in this area also. And it's the most bizarre thing I have ever heard of. And I think what he was trying to do was he was trying to find money being stolen or property being stolen from his establishment, and this was his way to get to the bottom of it. So he hired
a fake priest to come in. Well, I've not heard of that.
No, this is definitely something novel.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting. But if anybody wants to play the role of a fake priest, I've got some clerical garments I can rent you at a reasonable price.
No, you should not mention that. This seems very outrageous.
It is odd. It is odd.
And the feds have really come in and it sounds like
they're
investigated
all over
it, and he will have to pay quite a bit. Well, there's back wages, but there's going to be fines also. So the restaurant owner should not have done this.
And the interesting thing is, too, the archdiocese there has indicated that there was no priest by that name connected with the archdiocese.
This was not a priest.
It was not a priest.
I wonder if they found the gentleman who impersonated a priest. Is that against the law to impersonate a priest?
Well, I don't know. You're getting information from somebody under false pretenses.
Well, there you go.
All right, I think we're pretty much out of time now, so let's end with our Defender's Prayer. St. Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle, be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray, and do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, thrust into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who prowl about the world, seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. Thank you for joining us today. Reminding you that you can hear our bishop on the radio here every 9 a.m. Friday, and you can also read my columns in the Wanderer every week, and you can also listen to our podcast if you happen to miss one of our programs at iowacatholicradio.com. We'll be back again with another program. Until then, have a blessed and peaceful week.
Our freedom of conscience and religion is being challenged by laws and regulations imposed by secular society. Faith on Trial with Defender of the Faith, Deacon Mike Mano. Faith on Trial on Iowa Catholic Radio, iowacatholicradio.com, and the Iowa Catholic Radio app.